Hey everyone, this is part 3 of a 4-part interview that I did with my mom about Scientology, our experiences in Scientology, and this part 3 is really contains the reason that I went and did this interview with her in the first place. You know, the first 2 parts were good and we covered a lot of interesting information, but this is the one that really matters. This is the most personal video that I think I've done. I've talked about some pretty personal things in some of my Q&A videos, but I think this one really is really getting to the heart of some of my experiences in the Sea organization and with my family, and especially with my mom. And it was also this conversation that I had with my mom was probably one of the most cathartic experiences that I've had, and I think she would say the same in regards to our experiences in Scientology. We really get down into some pretty detailed information about our relationship and how I got out of Scientology, escaped from it eventually, and what would have, could have, should have happened during those years, you know. And it's all theoretical, it's all hypothetical, and a lot of this that we're talking about, we talked about not just for ourselves, but for you guys, especially if you are somebody out there who knows a person who is in a destructive cult like Scientology. It is heartbreaking to be disconnected, and also I feel really closes the door on any ability that you might have to be able to help that person. So at all costs, no matter what it takes, stay connected with a person who's in. Don't antagonize them. Don't give them a hard time about it, because that's never the way that you're going to convince them to leave, ever. It's never. I don't know one case where a person was argued out of a destructive cult. It doesn't work that way. We just don't, as human beings, we're not made up that way. We don't tick that way where we want to be, where we don't want to have somebody, threaten us, cajole us, insult us out of something. You know, never works. And of course, that's not what my mother tried to do to me. That's not what I'm implying here. But we talk about in this interview some of the things that maybe, you know, woulda, shoulda, coulda been done earlier that might have facilitated me leaving Scientology earlier than I did. In the end, you know, I have no regrets, and nothing that I say in this interview is any attempt to, you know, make my mom wrong or try to give her a hard time or anything like that. We're just talking about, you know, hypotheticals and stuff while we were talking about what happened. So I hope that you find this interesting, educational, enlightening, helpful in some way. That's why I made this, and I am more than happy to hear any feedback or comments you have after you've seen this. So here's my mom. You know, let's actually get into this. So you and I had a conversation at one point, even without, and this was actually before I went into the Sea Org. When I was starting to, I think it was in '94, when it was about a year before I went in the Sea Org, where I was upset that you were not doing Scientology, because I was so into it, I was so idealistic about it, right? Was constantly giving you a hard time. You should get back to flag, you should do this, you should that, to me telling you what you should do with your life, right? Because Scientology was the only thing that you should be doing and the best thing you should be doing and all that. And you had your own experiences with it, didn't want to go, didn't want to get into it, and I couldn't find out from you what it was that had happened that was so bad. All you would tell me at the time was, they're going to tell me I have to do the PTSSB course, which I don't need, I don't want to do, and I'm not going back. And that was all that you would say about it. And so I could never find out or draw out of you what had happened that was so horrible and awful, but I knew that somehow Scientology could deal with it, and you needed to do the rest of the bridge because it was just awful that you weren't.
Yeah.
And this became a point, though, where our relationship became strained because it was kind of, as far as what I remember, it was all I was talking about.
It was.
Right.
It was. I guess it's kind of true when they say a society is as sick as its secrets. I think that's true. And I think I first heard that from Oprah, although I don't think she coined it. But it really is kind of that way. And the same applies to a family, and the same applies to an organization. When it becomes, what's that word? We use it, something or another, dysfunctional. When something becomes dysfunctional, it's usually based on secrets. I couldn't tell you a lot of what happened to me at Flag and with your dad and stuff like that because it involved situations with your dad that I did not want to speak to or speak about with you. And I needed to resolve those issues myself anyway. You were the kid, I was the adult, So I think that we had secrets that we were holding and because of Scientology, because of things we learned in Scientology. Same thing. When your dad and I left the group, we didn't say a word about why and what was bothering us. When when you and your dad and I divorced, you were gone. I didn't want you to have all of that stuff. What were you going to do with it?
Right.
See what I mean?
Right.
Would have just been a distraction for you with what you were doing. And he's your dad. You know what I mean? So there was that for me, but I had no clue that the secrets you kept from me kept me from maybe fighting harder, to understand what was going on with you. And I don't know that we were estranged. We just were keeping it very social, like light. Like, let's not get into this because you weren't ready to do that either.
Well, it was sort of, this sort of, let's keep it light. Let's just sort of keep it, where in order to have any communication at all, right? We were doing that. But I was at one point, actually more than one point over the years, wondering whether this was even a communication, like whether this was a relationship that I should be keeping in my life, because Scientology has this thing about it, right? But you convinced me to.
What?
You convinced me to keep that. We had a phone conversation one day.
Okay.
And you said to me a number of things, but basically what you got across to me was that Scientology is all about improving conditions in life. That's what it's supposed to be for, right? It's supposed to improve things. That Scientology is, because I would say things to you like, well, Scientology is the one thing that's senior to life because it explains all of life, and so therefore you should be doing it because it's more important than anything else going on in your life because it's the most important thing in all of life, right? And you would
yes, you would say that.
Yes, that's right. And you would listen to this and you'd go, this kid, and you say, look, I totally get it, but you'd say, look, if Scientology is supposed to be making your life better, if it explains, that you have yourself and your family and your groups and mankind, if it explains all of life this way and breaks it all down, and if it explains communication and says that communication is the most important thing between you and your family and your groups and all these sort of things, and if that's all true. And I said, well, yeah, those things are all true, because of course I had to agree with that, because that is what Scientology fundamentals actually say. It's not necessarily what they do, but it is what they say, right? You were actually pointing out an inconsistency or a point about this without saying this is an inconsistency. You were insisting that if that's what Scientology is, then that's what we need to be doing. Right? That's what our relationship needs to be.
Pretty smart.
It was brilliant. I look back on it and I think it was like one of the
Wow.
most brilliant things that you could have possibly done.
Wow.
Because that was how you convinced me that if Scientology is all that, and if Scientology's whole goal is to make our relationship better, then how does it make any goddamn sense
Yeah.
for you to disconnect from me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Chris, I have to, well, again, principles being what they are. When I was doing the ethics officer thing, and there's the little thing about you have to handle or disconnect from your family. That disconnect part never made sense to me. I mean, that was like the worst extreme that a person would have to go through. So I always connected with the handle part of it. So when somebody came into me and, oh, my dad and oh, my mom and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, now how are you going to handle that? You're in a communications course. How are we going to handle that? What do you take home to communicate to your folks that is going to be acceptable? So that was the part I thought that made the sense to me, but that's not what I see happening,
Not
and
now.
that's no.
Yeah.
And so that again, it just kind of blows my mind,
Right.
because to me, if you make something better, it's not exclusive, it's inclusive. The more you can include in your life rather than exclude, the better your life
Exactly.
is.
And philosophically, I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
And that was something that you pointed out to me or showed me, right? Using Scientology, right?
I get it.
Using Scientology reasoning that stuck with me
Good.
for the rest of the years that I was in Scientology,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And that's how we. And I wanted to. It was one of the most important things I wanted to talk about in this conversation with you, right? Was that, and it was a phone call. It wasn't even something you did in person. I remember I was sitting in the treasury office of the Santa Barbara org, and this is one of those indelible moments of my life that I just will never forget.
Wow.
Was that conversation.
Wow.
Because it changed my view of you, of our relationship, because our relationship had been deteriorating
Right.
because of Scientology.
Right. And when you were in the Sea Org, after you got in the Sea Org, I was aware of that, and I was aware that because there was so much distance between us, physically and otherwise, I was walking on eggshells for years, not wanting to mess with that, because you were okay. You could have made the decision to come and visit more often. I often said, Sunny visits her family. Why don't you visit me?
That's right.
And I still don't know the answer to that.
I'll tell you.
Tell me.
I had a very twisted idea of what dedication and purpose were, and I had a bit of a martyr complex, right? For lack of a better term, it's not like I'm speaking from some psychological viewpoint here.
I get it. I know what that is.
Well, no, I'm just saying I don't know what it means in a psychological textbook. I've never read that. I'm just saying
No,
I had a martyr complex.
When you
know?
got one, you know it. I
Yeah.
got one.
Right. I thought I was so dedicated. I was so hardcore about what we were doing, and I also was, and that drove me. That kept me there. The other half of that was that I was in an environment where the franticness level, right, was kept so high
Oh.
all the time that I always felt guilty for even thinking about doing something else,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
That was what it was like, because I couldn't get away for even a day, like taking a day off, without, you better have your phone turned on, and right up until the last second that it was approved, you could have it rescinded because some emergency might come up, and some what we called a flap, some flap might happen, and then you'd have to be called back in to deal with it. And it wasn't like that never happened. There were days where that happened.
Yeah.
And so there was this palpable, real sense of impending doom at any moment that hung over my entire world. My entire life was this black cloud hanging over me all the time.
Wow.
And it made me feel guilty for removing myself from that environment because we were saving the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it was constantly drummed into us that that's what we were doing, that there was nothing else more important than what we were doing, and that anything else that anybody else was doing in the world meant nothing.
So, did you have different seniors than Sonny did?
Yes and no. I had a different for periods of time. I did. I mean, there was a period of time where Sonny was over. Sonny was my ex-wife, right? She was over at ASHO at another org for a while, working over there, and I knew though that I had this sort of different guilt thing. that could be played on me, and so and also third thing that I'm just now remembering is that it was so painful to get time off. It took so much work, and you had to go through so much. It's probably the closest thing I ever experienced to getting ulcers.
Wow.
Like it was just stomach wrenching to me,
Chris.
right? To try to get time off because of this. I could almost see the hammer over my head, or the razor or whatever you want to call it, that was just waiting to fall on me if some flap came up, some happenstance, right? Because life in the Sea organization, and especially in management, in church management where I worked at this time, was such a frantic series of emergencies, one after another. You never knew from day to day what was going to be coming. And it could be anything, and it could be from anywhere. It could be some order from Miscavige, some order from higher management, from RTC, from CMO, like all these alphabet organizations within Scientology that are all senior to me, and all have the power to send me to scrub dishes or clean pots or go to the RPF or whatever at any moment if I screw up, right? And so there's a very, very real threat level all the time. And then this frantic emergency-ness always being yelled at, right? Like you're just getting yelled at every day, right? Either your direct senior or some other person's coming in or some group of girls are coming in, like these teenage girls in the CMO who literally, I had 13, 14-year-olds like just ripping
Chris,
my face off,
How did you stand it for as long as you did?
Because I really thought that what we did mattered.
Yeah. Well, I
was
that.
convinced.
I totally
was
get
so
that.
convinced.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
So I'm in the fun part of Scientology thinking that, and you're in the suppressive part of Scientology
the
thinking
completely
that.
horrible part of Scientology, right? Thinking.
See, and I didn't know.
And I know you didn't know, and I couldn't tell you.
And here was my overriding thing while you were doing all this for years. I mean, you would relate some things to me. I mean, we'd have some personal conversations. Like, I'm having trouble with this, or I'm having trouble with that. But we'd talk about it, and, but my overriding thing was, I am not going to let anything step between you and me. We came first. You and I came first. Scientology came next. We're the bond that counts. This is the one that should matter.
Right.
And yet, I knew you were over here going, they mattered.
That's right. And for me, it was a tennis match, a ping pong match.
So I didn't want to put anything there.
Right.
I wanted you off my case. Stop calling me and telling me about how wonderful Scientology's new thing is, and I got to buy all the new books, and stop telling me about that. And we had a conversation where I said, look, there's nothing that you're going to say that's going to get me back and active in Scientology. I will do that when I'm ready to do that,
Right.
not because you say so, something like that.
That's right.
So let's spend our time talking about something else. And you did. You honored that. And I, in turn, tried not to give you advice or do anything that would give you more conflict.
Right.
And
you did good at that. And you did good at that. You know, because you did.
Because it would have been the wrong thing to do.
Right. That's right. That's
it would have been
right.
much easier for you to say, okay, that's it. I'm going with these guys. As bad as they are, at least this is a conflict that I'm getting used to and dealing with. I can't do both. And I kind of always thought maybe that was the reason you didn't want to, come home, because you were afraid that we would, have conversations or something. I didn't know.
No, that was never an issue.
Okay, good.
That was never an issue. And in fact, it leads me, actually, you bringing that up is really good, because it leads me to the other point I wanted to make about this, about our relationship and me and Scientology at the time, for people who watch this and
Forget about that.
are wondering,
Yeah.
Because there are parents out there who have kids who are in, right? And they're like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't want to get disconnected, and that sort of thing, it was that prompted me to do this more than anything else, right? Was because I feel like as long as it took, and as bad as my life got sometimes, we're here now because you did it right. But I wanted to also point out, right? I mean, as long as it took, because it took years,
Yeah.
right? But we never disconnected, right? And the way that conversation that, like I said, that I'll never forget, was the root of that. That was the point where it changed, where I decided I was never going to disconnect from you.
Well, then I'm really glad
see?
I said that.
I am too.
That
was a very important phone call.
To me, it wasn't as significant as it was to you, but I'm sure glad we had it.
Yeah, it was a very important phone call. But then, the additional point I wanted to make was, when I did get home, or were those times when I could have gotten, in front of you guys, the times that I did get in front of you guys, right? Because I remember a trip where I went home when you guys were still together in Vacaville, and Dad and I were sitting there talking, and Dad was railing about the inefficiencies of management and how bad Scientology management was, and this sort of thing. This was pre-Sea Org. This was when I was still a Class 5 staff member. It would have had to have been in Santa Barbara. And he was just going on at a mad rate about it. And I just nodded and smiled, because that's how I sometimes deal with conflict, as I just smile, try to slough it off, But he was really trying to drive this point home to me. And I think it was Dad's way of trying to get me to look at what I was involved in and maybe reevaluate it. But he was doing it wrong. And the reason he was doing it wrong was not the words he was saying, it was how he was saying it.
Aggressive.
He was aggressive and antagonistic about it.
Yeah.
And it rubbed me the wrong way. Right? It just did. And I wasn't going to be, I respect my dad.
Sure.
And so I wasn't going to say, shut the hell up, but I did try to make excuses, right? I felt defensive. I felt like I was on the defensive because he was attacking the organization. He wasn't attacking me, but I felt like I had to defend the organization.
Right.
And when you put somebody in that position, you are not scoring points with them, right?
That's true.
I never felt like, just as a contrast, I never felt you did that, right? You expressed your position, you expressed how you felt, but you weren't expressing, what was wrong with the organization, what was wrong with my environment, what was wrong with, those guys are doing this and this and this to you, and that sort of thing. That never came out of your mouth, right? So to that degree,
I didn't know.
Well, but to that degree, you were doing it right, right? But you were always a person that I felt like I could talk to, Now, of course, now Dad and I can talk to each other just fine. I'm not saying that
Right.
there's some big wall between us. What I'm saying is that his attempts to show me or enlighten me or convince me that what I was involved in isn't what I thought it was,
It had the opposite
it had the
effect.
opposite effect, right?
Yeah.
When he had the opportunity to, he had a captive audience. I was there, right? I was in front of him. I was away from the church. When he had an opportunity to change my mind, that was not the way to go about it.
Okay.
Right?
That's a good point.
And I wanted to also say, on reflection, what would have probably got me thinking or changing my mind, and I can't be 100% sure of this, but I think in looking back on it, would have been getting more out of me about what I was running into, what I was experiencing, what
Right.
sort of things were happening, right? And getting me to somehow overcome the suppressed or the shields that Scientology staff and then later the Sea Org had installed to not talk about it, right? A lot of more curiosity about what my life was like or what I was going through or what was happening, what was my day-to-day like, that sort
Right.
of thing, would have opened me up more.
Right.
And then you would have had an opening to point out something or comment, maybe even just very subtly, but somehow comment, well, that's not really per policy. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know, but they're trying to do better. Yeah, I get it. But that's really not per policy. And that's it. That's it.
Exactly.
That's it. Then we're
Exactly.
done.
You know,
Something like that.
Exactly. And I think that that's really good information for people to have.
Yeah.
Now, some people, don't know Scientology and their kids do. So that those people who don't know Scientology can't really say something like that. But
No.
to say what are some of the things what are some of the conflicts
Yes.
that you're having?
Exactly.
Now, for me, because we kind of had this understanding that we were going to stay in comm, but it wasn't going to get into conflict
Right.
on the phone,
Right.
because both of us knew that wasn't going to work. I was glad that when you reached out to me at times to say maybe I'm having some 2D problems or something.
Right. Relationship troubles.
Right. And the position that put me in was tough, because here I am, part of your family, and you're talking about another part of your family, your wife, and I respect that relationship more than I respect your relationship with Scientology, and I respect our relationship more than I respected your relationship with Scientology. And I knew that you had an internal conflict right here, because if you left Scientology, what were you going to do with your wife? I mean, that was a double-edged sword right there. Like, I'm going to make advice about that? I don't think so. I'm going to try to, be there for you in giving you any logical advice I can about how to work things out. If nothing else, go to the chaplain's office. Both
Yeah.
of you go to the chaplain's office.
Which we didn't even have.
Yeah, see?
There wasn't even a chaplain's
Yeah.
office to go to.
So I was kind of being your chaplain, and unbeknownst. But the big deal was I knew that when you came to that point of staying or going, that you had a double
Oh, yeah. You're
decision.
talking about when we were talking in 2011.
Yeah.
Once I finally
'Cause
started
are you going to leave your wife? Are you going to leave Scientology? If you're going to leave Scientology, is she going to leave with you? Are you going to leave her?
Yeah, no.
What's going to happen there? So, and at that point, you're old enough, and I'm old enough to realize that that I had to stay objective about what you were going to do. And I knew then you were struggling.
Well, you and Dad always took great pains to, or at least what I recall. There was a point in 2003, I think it was, when I took off. I went AWOL for 3 days. I just got up one night at midnight, after a very long day, after months of hell, and I just got up and I walked out the back door, and I walked all night long, and I walked from the Los Angeles Center, the big blue buildings, all the way downtown LA, all the way to Pasadena. I just walked. And then I crashed in a hotel for 3 days, and then I called you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you were, of course, divorced by then. I was well into the Sea Org. And this is after 8 years of management, that frantic, crazy, insane-making situation.
Right.
And you guys both, what I recall both of you saying was, separately was, what you do, what you feel you should be doing, what you got to do, sort of thing. And there wasn't, there was just support offered.
Right.
It wasn't anything else but support. We'll be there for you,
right.
No matter what you decide
Whatever
to do.
You decide.
Right, sort of thing. And that was good. I needed to hear that at the time, right?
Yeah.
Dad said, don't, you should go back because you should leave clean, he said. If you're going to leave, then you should leave clean. Which, in hindsight, has a certain degree of rightness connected to it, but, knowing what I know now, it would have been,
I don't think I would have said that. Did I say that?
You said I'll support you no matter what you do.
Good.
Right.
that's
what you
good.
said, right? And I think later on in 2011, when I hit that point again where I was just like, I'm really done with this. Mm-hmm. You guys were both, again, separately, sports you whenever you want to do, sort of thing. I think both times were opportunities to say, get the hell out. Mm-hmm. Just get out. Just go. Just come, I'll buy you a ticket. Come home right now, sort of thing. And I could have. And I don't know what I would have done. Should I
have said that?
I think so.
Really?
I think so. Looking back on it now,
I wish I had.
I think that would have been about as, or if it had been feasible, and I don't know if it would have been or not, what would have definitely worked would have been if you'd come. You'd said, oh my God, stay right there. I'm coming. That would have actually kept me out. That would have kept me away. Because I had taken off. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I just called you after 3 days of getting sleep and getting some food in me and chilling.
Well, I knew I didn't want you to go back. I knew that.
It probably real good, whether it would have resulted in me going back or not, because the thing that hooked me to go back was Sunny, I was married.
Right.
And I love my wife.
Right.
But to that degree, I also was not looking at the Sea organization clearly. I was looking at my wife.
Right.
That's what got me back, right? But I'm just saying. But my life ended up being without her. To 2011.
Right. As it turned out.
As it turned out, because that marriage wasn't really a marriage that was working for me. Right. And, another 8 years of that finally beat that into my head.
Right.
So good. I love my wife. Great. That was great. But my life was a ruin, and I was as low as it got right there.
Had I known that in that one phone call,
right,
I would have.
Well, maybe that's why I'm saying it now.
Yeah, I would have come.
I haven't given this tons and tons and tons of thought.
No, but
I've never looked back on this until right now
Yeah.
and thought what I'm saying right now.
Yeah.
This has never been a point
But that's good to know.
Yeah.
Because that might help somebody else.
Exactly.
Maybe that'll be the right thing for them to say. Here's what I was looking at that time was it's a time of crisis for you.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I really wanted you to do was go back, but I knew that you were married. And so I didn't want you dragged back later either. So I didn't care whether you left clean or not. I was washing windows and walked out the door and said, that's it. And it worked out fine for me.
Right.
So I wasn't afraid of you doing that. I thought I told you I'd send you money if that's, if you needed money, I'd send you money.
And you might have.
But that probably wasn't what you were looking for.
Mm-mm.
But here's what I envision today. Had you come home, had you come to my place at that time, they would have come looking for you, and Sonny would have been on the phone. And those two things would have dragged you back anyway. That's my thinking.
And it's not incorrect thinking.
Because that would have been worse. That would have been worse for all of us.
I don't know how it would have turned out.
I don't know.
I can't say
Well,
for sure
maybe not.
how it would have turned out.
Neither
but
can
it
I.
would have
Neither
given
can I.
it, I can
Yeah.
say for sure though that
Yeah.
it would have given me more perspective.
That's true.
And that's I guess who knows what you look back on things that happened in the past.
Yeah,
Who would have, should have, could have, right? And that's not really my point. I'm really talking about what can somebody do
Right.
when there's an
And
opportunity
that would
that
have
presents
been
itself.
that would have been something.
And personal contact could have changed everything
Sure.
at that time.
Sure.
Stay there. I'm going to come down and see you, and let's go and let's talk.
Yeah.
And maybe even somehow. I mean, here's a really wild thought, but why the hell not? If we're sitting here talking about what if, should have, could have, maybe you taking me back to the base and saying, I got to talk to my wife. And somehow with you there, that would have put pressure on them to allow something like that to happen. Who knows? There's so many things that could have been,
I know.
that could have been different. But, but it's just there are these opportunities that come up, and you look at them, and what happened, and I got zero regrets about it. But I'm looking at it now going, well, where were there opportunities to maybe have done something differently that could have resulted in something different where I didn't waste another 9 years of my life? Because let's face it, the last 8 or 9 years after that were a total waste. I mean, I then ended up on the RPF for 3 of those years, and then everything else.
Chris, I just didn't know. I
didn't see the RPF coming at that moment.
Ugh.
I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was, going down as a person.
Well, I missed an opportunity there.
That's, I think, and I wanted to highlight it not to
Yeah.
make you feel bad, but just to show that there was an opportunity.
Right. My feeling at that time, and actually when you were in Minnesota,
in 2011,
was if I don't stay objective here, if I don't stay unbiased, if I throw my hammer in the ring, it's going to backfire on me. It's not the right thing to do for you because you're an adult. Those decisions are tough decisions to reach, but if somebody is reaching them for you, that's the wrong thing to do.
For sure.
I just felt like I needed to be objective, but for you to know, I wish I had now. The last time I said, "You come here. You just come here. Whatever it takes for you to get here, come here. You have a safe place to land." That's what I said the last time. I wish I had been more emphatic about that first time.
Right.
Because had I known what was going to happen to you that happened, I would have wanted to have saved you from that.
And that safe place, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that decided it for me in 2011 that I was waffling around on earlier in 2003 was not knowing where would I go? What would I do?
And you always could.
And it's an assumption.
I thought you.
Sometimes it needs to be said out loud.
Here's what changed your relationship with your wife. By then, it had changed, so that wasn't the issue. I knew that wasn't the issue the second time around.
That's right.
Now,
the marriage had tanked at that point.
Yeah, so there wasn't. So that was the time for you to go, really.
But me staying in the Sea Org for a marriage was such the wrong reason.
I know.
And I could have seen that. So it's a gamble. It's a total gamble.
It
right?
is.
It's not. I don't want to say it's like it takes knowing the person you're talking to. There's no rote. This is what you do every single time sort of thing. I wanted to talk about this so that we had the circumstances kind of laid out, and we could talk about what we could have done differently. That was me. That was you. Your thinking was not wrong, and in fact, you staying objective. This is exactly where I landed when I got out. Right here, it did work. So,
I guess
so
if
it's
I-
not that you're wrong.
Here's
you know?
here's my thought. Now that we're looking at this, at either that first point or at this point, if I said, "Chris, let me just make this decision for you,"
Yeah.
should I have just said that?
No.
Right.
No.
And that's why I
No.
could.
And that wouldn't have been the way to go about it.
No.
you know?
But I mean, but manipulating you into that decision either is not the right way to do
No,
it. It's
and
just
it's not
gotta be,
getting somebody out of a destructive cult is not a matter of manipulation. It's a matter of education and
Yeah.
showing them a door
right.
and letting them walk through it.
That's
Right? And my head was in a place where I could see different doors, but I didn't know which one to walk through.
Yeah. Right.
And if I had taken a little bit more time and a little bit, because there was nothing. I mean, I was gone for 3 days. It's not like I was on a timer. I could have been gone for another 3 days and nothing really would have changed.
Right.
It wasn't like I felt compelled that I have to go back today.
Right.
It was just I finally felt like I had enough food and sleep in me that I could start to think rationally.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So, take maybe, not from the point of view of I'm going to come down and get you and we're going to change your life now, but I'm going to come down and we're going to talk about what your options are.
Mm-hmm.
That would have actually been objective.
Right.
But let's really lay it all out on the table.
Right.
I never did that. There always this, I have to go back. And it was like, well, let's just take a look at this.
Right.
Let's look. Do you have to go back? Do you not? What would happen if? What would happen if not?
Yeah.
Let's just take a really good, solid look at this door.
I should have come to LA during that time. That's
Well,
what
that's
I
what
should have
that's
done.
what I'm saying.
Here's my fear. I'll tell you what my fear is. I thought if at that time you decided to leave and you had Sonny here and you had the Sea Org here and they got you to go back just to leave clean, however they get you to go back, I would have been the SP after that. And we would not have a relationship after that.
And I don't think that would have happened.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think that would have happened.
They wouldn't have.
Oh, I didn't see. They already tried that. And see, for about 3 or 4 times after that, big, huge phone conversation we had that I'll never forget thing, right? Back when I was a staff member. When I was in the Sea Org, there were 3 different times I can remember where there was an effort made to get me to disconnect from you.
For why?
Because of different reasons. Because it was felt that you were disaffected and a bad person and all the things that were true. It wasn't like wasn't like they didn't know. But I didn't care.
Okay, because of that
Because
phone
you were my
conversation.
mom.
All right.
Right?
See, and that's what I felt about you all this time too. I just didn't know the degree of your, I don't know what to say, cultivization.
Right.
I did.
Brainwashing? Yeah.
No, seriously, Chris, I without you coming home to visit and wanting to spend time with me, I really didn't know what was behind that, because I knew that Sonny could do it. So if Sonny could do it, you should have been able to do it. And I didn't realize that it was your mental status that was keeping you there.
Yeah.
I really didn't get.
I don't think that a lot of parents really realize, this is another actually really good point. I don't think a lot of parents really realize that
No.
Of course your kid wants to see you. Of course they want to spend time with their parents. Of course they love their parents. But there's not really as much credence, as much recognition given of how powerful that mind control can be. Especially when you're in the C organization. Daily indoctrination
Yeah.
on how what you're doing for the C organization is more important than anything in the world. Period. It's constant. It's drummed into you constantly. And so that overriding message, which is right there in your face every day, people yelling it at you, people telling you, you talk about it with your friends. I mean, it's just a constant reality that that the environment you're in and the job you're doing is more important than anything. So that's the battle that parents or friends outside of the C organization have. It's an impossible battle. So when those opportunities do come up, it's not a matter of
recognize it for what it is.
That's right.
And I truly, that first time, I could have done more with that. I could have done more with that if I had recognized what it was.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes you'll only get a glimmer, a hint, the tiniest comment. But when you're getting something like that out of a Sea Org member, they are speaking volumes to you, right? When you're getting some disaffected statement, some little comment about how life is rough for them right now, or things aren't going so great, or something like that, when they are actually saying something to that degree, that's huge.
That's a big thing. Let me ask you something. So your dad offers you a safe spot if you want to come, and but says, my advice is go back and do it clean. And I say to you, whatever you decide, I'm totally behind you 100%, and you can come here anytime you want. What made you decide not to?
I don't actually recall. I mean, in 2011, I was already deciding to go, right?
Right.
Back in 2003, I don't remember you guys saying that as such.
That I'd support you no matter what you decided?
I remember you saying that.
But I should have said
that you have a safe space here. I don't remember that
maybe
communication.
I didn't say it.
I don't remember that.
Say it then.
It was more of, it was kind of like, well, this has happened. I'm here. I'm standing in a phone booth right now talking to you.
Right.
And,
I should have done more.
kind of wondering what to do right now, sort of
I should have
thing.
done more.
And it was like, I'll support you no matter what you want to do, sort of thing. I think definitely at that moment I was outside of the Sea Org.
Yep.
I put myself outside the Sea Org. That was a pretty rare moment, know. And
I miss that.
Yeah, and that was a big one.
And something else, I'm going to tell you something else that you told me just recently in a conversation we had. Remember when you wanted to join staff at Santa Barbara originally? Yes. You weren't 18 yet. I had to sign a paper that said, I'm giving Chris my permission to join staff, which I did not want to do. I wanted you to, you were finished with high school. I wanted you to have at least
started
one
college.
Semester in junior college.
That's right. I was doing college for 3 weeks.
Please, just finish this semester. I think you're really going to like it, and I think this whole college experience is going to really speak to you.
Yep.
I don't want to do this.
Yep.
And you were ticked. You were really mad at me. And the logic you used then was, if I have to spend 6 more months in this house and be miserable and then do it, okay, fine, but I don't see any point in that.
That's right.
And I said, well, there is no point if that's what it's going to be, and that's the only choice. I mean, we're talking 6 months. It wasn't a lifetime.
That's right.
But I said, if you're so committed that for absolutely sure you're just going to be miserable until then, and honestly, I believe that was true. So I signed that thing. Mm-hmm. Recently, you said, Mom, I think if you hadn't signed that, I might have worn off.
That's right.
And I missed that, which really ticks me off.
Yes.
Really ticks me off.
Well, it's the buy now, right? You have to do it now. Now. This is actually something Rachel pointed out to me as well, right? I knew this, and then she stressed it. Rachel Bernstein, right? Which was, a cult. It's one of the signs of a destructive cult or a destructive situation that somebody is trying to get you involved in is it's always now. Don't think about this. Don't give yourself time to look it over. Don't go home and go over things on the internet and do your research. It's you feel this way right now. We've gotten you into this emotional state right now, and you need to act on it, right? And had I been forced to stay home for another 6 months, because it was 3 months or 6 months or whatever until my birthday at that point, that emotional high would have worn off.
Could have worn off.
It definitely would have.
But the other side of it is, if I was saying no, 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 and they were saying yes, 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 and you were saying yes, 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 then I was just the catalyst to make you more determined to do it.
There is that aspect to it.
It
But
could have
here's
gone either
the
way.
other thing that you guys were doing wrong at that time, right? And again, this is all hindsight,
Yeah.
right? But you guys were yelling and screaming at me. We had 3 days of the most knockdown, drag-out
We
fights
did.
I've ever
I
had
didn't
with you
want
guys.
you to do it.
I know, but Dad and you, I mean, it was the wrong way to go about it. I'm sorry, but it just was, because that's what got my back up more than anything else.
Probably.
Sure. Dad sitting there telling me things like, you haven't done anything for 4 years of your life. You have no idea what you're talking about. Tell any 17-year-old that and watch what happens. All right?
It's true. It's true.
Anything, right? And
Yeah.
so all of the arguments that were used against me just drove me straight into their clutches, so to speak, because the reason that this was so perfect for Scientology when I was 17 years old and I was being recruited is I had to go to the org every day because I was doing the purification rundown. And they were seeing me after I was done, and they were working me hard to be staff there. Mm-hmm. And I was only on the Purif for like 5 or 7 days or something. I mean, it didn't take that long to get through it. But they were working me when that happened. Yeah. And then I'd go home every day, and they were working me by love bombing me. They were like, I was the greatest thing in the world.
And then we were the meanest, awfulest people.
That's right. And I'd go home. You are stupid. You're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. We've been there. You haven't. We know. You don't. I'm like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. 17 years old.
That's right.
There's no,
that is right.
That
is right.
So everything that happened there was, driving me to that.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And I wore you guys down.
You did.
Because they were pumping me up so much that I was able to.
Yeah.
And even though, I remember at least one time I lost it. I mean, we were having these fights, and I just was like, I was like, why are you guys doing this to me, and it was like, you're doing this to yourself, and I was just like, wow, just drive me into their arms, so it was, and that's what happened, and that's what happened, So again, point being, we're sitting here talking about this right now, and I just want people out there to know, do it right. Talk, not yell. Don't antagonize. Don't be angry.
And if you really don't have enough confidence to do it, to know what the right thing to do is, get a professional. There's people out there now.
That's right.
Like Rachel,
yep.
Or like other people who understand these situations that professionally can help you, and it'll cost you some money.
It will.
But it depends on how much you want to do the right thing in order to really help somebody get out of Scientology. Because today, people should get out of Scientology. And
they should have that.
If it had stayed the way it was when, in the beginning, but nothing does. When you're dealing with an organization that's so primed to become a cult, and it does, you got to recognize it for what it is, which I didn't for years, but I certainly do now.
Right.
Now with more information and somebody can say I'm so stupid for not having gone on the internet, but I wasn't looking at that for you. I wasn't looking at, let me get a clear picture of what Scientology is today so I can help Chris, because that wasn't where I was coming from. That was your decision to get
be part
in
of
or
it,
stay
to do
out,
it,
or the thing that I feel badly about, I still feel badly about it, is that you were raised with, as objectively as we might have tried to do it, you were raised with Scientology principles. You were raised, from the time you were 2 years old. We were involved in that organization, and you were raised with a lot of the teachings. I never wanted you to be or not be a Scientologist. I just wanted you to have some of the best parts of it to see if that would help your life. But I didn't like you going on staff. I liked it even less when you went in the Sea Org. I didn't want you that involved with it because I had learned my own lessons that nobody needs to be that involved with it to get any of the good stuff out of it.
Right.
You and I definitely disagreed on that point. So what do you do with that kind of a disagreement when you're raising a person who you want to be independent in their life and do what they think is making them happy? I had a lot of flack from my family when I joined Scientology. My brother Rich, I come from a big family of 9 kids, and I'm the oldest. So I'm sure my parents didn't like the example I was setting for the younger kids. And my brother Rich said, she's already living in California. You know, that's the land of the fruits and nuts. And she just turned into one of the nuts. So that's how my family saw me. And to save face when I went back there, was like not the easiest thing in the world. But I was really, dedicated and committed to the degree that I was when I was doing it. In this life, I don't think that there's anything you can't walk away from. So when it got uncomfortable enough for me to not even recognize who I was anymore or what I was doing, I walked away from it. And I wasn't happy to see you walking into it, but I understood, and I understood my, what I had done in order for
your contribution to
yes,
that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel bad about that. There's nothing I can do about it.
Well, there's never been any, I think I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again, just so everybody is very clear about this. I've never had 1 ounce of blame, shame, and regret directed at you guys for what happened to me in my life.
You haven't.
Not even a little bit. It's never even crossed my mind that what happened to me was because of my parents. I've always taken responsibility for my own decisions, right? And honestly, that's actually because that's what Scientology taught me to do, and that's a positive aspect of Scientology, right? Because it's not all negative. It's not all black and white. Nothing ever is.
And it's not. If something was so bad that it was that you were kidnapped and you couldn't wait to get away, and again, balances.
That's right.
You must be getting a person, not you. A person is getting something out of whatever game they're playing, whether it's a dysfunctional game or not, until they see it differently.
Right.
And when they see it differently, they'll stop playing that game. And I wish that I had intervened sooner. Now that we're talking about this, yes, I wish I had handled that situation in LA differently. Because it could have saved you a lot of years had I done that.
It also, and it just would have been different. That's all. I can't say it would have been better. I can't say it would have been worse. I honestly don't know. My head was in such a place at that moment that it would have taken some real recovery. Yeah. And it still has. I mean, you know what I mean? But it's just, events happen the way they happen.
This time you were ready for it. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that you were put on a mission, which wasn't good for your marriage, but it was good for your understanding of your marriage.
Yes.
Because that marriage was not going anywhere at the time back then.
That's right.
I didn't know that. I didn't want to influence that one way or another. I really didn't want to.
No, of course.
But I think that mission that they put you on, which pretty much dissolved what was left of your relationship.
Basically, I was out away from the Sea Org base for the greater part of 4 years.
Right.
On a series of projects, or what are called missions in the Sea Org. And I was away from my wife, and I was away from the Sea Org base, driving around all over the Western United States doing logistics work and recovering people to Scientology and that sort of thing. And it gave me a lot of space and a lot of perspective that I didn't have back in 2003.
Exactly.
And that was able to, over time, change my thinking as well, right? It was a very unique experience.
I think that saved your life.
I don't disagree with you. And we all have to live through what we have to live through in order to arrive where we're at.
Right.
That, hindsight bias is whatever it is, right? We're just talking about this from the perspective of would have, could have, should have, and trying to do this in such a way that maybe things could have been different if things had been done differently, and maybe that might give some perspective to people out there right now.
And I think right now, the advantage that friends, family, and parents of somebody who's in Scientology has right now is the internet. That wasn't there before.
That's right.
Scientology has always been controversial, and actually back in the day, it lived on that. People went on talk shows and talked about it. Heber Gents, I remember, on
right.
shows making an idiot out of himself, but we're all like, "Yay, Heber!"
Go Heber!
And
now people don't even know who Heber is.
They don't. They don't.
In Scientology.
But the point is, there's been enough known and unsecreted about Scientology that is on your side, and it's on the side of that person who's in Scientology, because you can help them just having that knowledge yourself and being certain of that knowledge yourself, and somehow finding a way to know the person that you love enough to say something that will click, like that phone call.
That's right.
And it doesn't have to come from internet, information on the internet. It's what you feel in your heart. You and that person have a far stronger bond, even if Scientology has tried to break it, than they do with Scientology.
That's right. Especially when it comes to family.
True.
Especially when it comes to family.
Yeah.
But it requires, the points that I've highlighted here are points where dad, or you, mostly dad, didn't have compassion, understanding, and respect.
Right.
For the
Respect
person that they're talking to.
Biggest.
Right? Respect is huge.
Yeah.
Not respect the belief, respect the person.
Right.
Right? Because they get confused all the time, right? We're talking about respect for the person. You have those three things, and then you have love. Those are some of the most powerful motivating forces we've got working for us, right? So those are the things that will speak to the person,
right?
And I think in those moments that we've highlighted where it did work, where what you did mattered to me, and where it made a change, is because you had those three things. You had care or compassion, you had understanding, you totally understood, and you respected me for what I was doing.
Well, I did. I believe that when people become adults, at 17, I really wish I had stuck to my guns, although it would have been terrible.
It would have been terrible, but it would have been.
But I wish I had now,
yeah.
Thinking about it, because I didn't even think about that till we talked a couple weeks ago.
That's right.
But I believe that when people are adults, not 17, but adults, they have a right to make the mistakes that they're going to make in their life, and that's the best way for them to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It can be awful. They can make awful mistakes. They can get on drugs. They can get on alcohol. They can be with the wrong people. They can do a lot of things. If Scientology or a cult is one of the things that you choose, you have to find a way to maintain your relationship with them in spite of that.
Mm-hmm.
On any level that is acceptable to the two of you, and know that it comes from a place of love and respect.
Right.
It's their
Exactly.
life. It's a tough thing for a parent to do. If I had known it was as bad as it was, I would have been a tougher parent. But I was still operating on a different operating basis.
That's right.
And you weren't being honest with me.
That is correct.
And I wasn't being totally honest with how much I wanted you out of there either, because I was walking on eggshells.
Right.
So they're strange little games that we play with each other, and there's a better way to do it than that.
Right. That's right.
I think honesty is the big thing. Honesty based on love. That's the big thing.
Exactly.
Not the kind of love that's it's the love with respect. If you leave the respect out of it, love is a wishy-washy kind of clingy thing. If you have respect along with it, respect and love give you the rights that you need as a human being, along with the feeling of being wanted.
Exactly. And eventually
it wins out.
that worked.
It does work.
That's right.
But Scientology doesn't give that to you.
No, it does not.
Yeah.
And it took years to, beat that out of me. But for Scientology to beat it out of me,
Yeah.
because,
You're a
of
pretty
all
strong
the...
person.
Well, I
to take
guess,
it all that time. Or dumb.
Yeah, probably more. Nailed it. But, but that's, that maintained. And it had, had you said anything or I done anything that had allowed the disconnection to occur,
Yeah, it would have been awful.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Right.
So no matter what, keep that alive.
Yeah.
You always have hope.
Yeah.
No matter how long it takes, you always have hope. If the line is cut,
Yeah.
the disconnection happens, that hope is gone.
Well,
So, or
at least
at
for
least,
a time.
yeah.
At least for a time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Makes it much harder.
Yeah.
Way harder. And
Yeah.
it's already hard enough.
Yeah.
So,
But even if you don't respect the group that person is
Yeah.
involved in, leave that out of the conversation. There's no point.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's if you respect them for their choices, the choice can be a bad one. That's not for you to evaluate. Come back to the person to
That's right.
maintain what you have with them.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's all.